Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee with the Critters, where we live stream from the Animal Behavior Center's Facebook page every Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. So for those of you that may be new, hello and welcome. My name is Laura Joseph, owner of the Animal Behavior Center. We're an international educational center where we help empower people all over the world and the animals that they care for. Our focus is on empowering animals using the science of behavior called applied behavior analysis, which includes positive reinforcement. And we do that through our services, some of them which are free to the public, such as this Coffee with Critters. The other ones we offer are our annual memberships where people belong to online learning programs offered through us. And you can find that on our website at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. You'll also see our additional services that we offer, including a day with the trainer, which is a day with me, or 2 days or 3 days training by my side, where I focus on helping you, your organization, and your challenges. And based on your needs, you will work with me with different species of animals because we learn how to do better by working with species we may not be familiar with. It'll help us fine tune our approach, our fluency, understanding behavior, recognizing behavior, understanding reinforcements. Um, and you can also follow us on right here, the work that we do on our events page, which is located on our website, or right here on our Facebook page. We have several different upcoming events, and we have 2024 pretty much laid out on the workshops that we offer. We also offer virtual workshops, which we've been doing for years, virtual presentations for different organizations. We also come to you in addition to you coming up to us. Under our events section, you will see different workshops that we are offering. One of our next ones is our parrot enrichment workshop. We haven't had one of these in several years. So we're excited about this, and I do believe it's the weekend of October 14th and 15th, where there are people already signing up. There are several seats left available, or some seats, I can't remember. We just opened this up to the public last week. We do keep it limited, but in this workshop, we're going to focus on parrots, but definitely not limited to why enrichment is important, how to increase complexities, enrichment to focus on behavior issues, designing aviaries, designing play gyms, because those of you that work with animals know that keeping animals' environments changing, exploring new areas helps prevent a lot of behavior issues related to just keeping them in their enclosure. So, with that being said, also I wanted to mention that if you need to get in touch with me, you can always reach me at my email address, Laura at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. Feel free to reach out to me. I respond to emails fairly quickly. You can also sign up for our email newsletter list. Good morning, everybody. And if you are on our email newsletter list, you are notified of all Coffee with the Critters, all upcoming events. We have been showing different videos each week of training or enrichment or behavior that we're working on, how it's progressing, and how we keep it progressing. So today's topic is, what is it? When positive reinforcement is no longer positive. So I've talked about this before in the past, and I have a long list I've got 3 pages worth of things to talk about today, bullet points to hit on, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to all of them. We will dive deeper into this in our membership programs. Good morning, everybody. So, if you are not part of our membership programs, you're really missing out on a lot. If you want to understand the science of behavior and working with animals, if you want a certain species of animals, those are our projects. You can find them under our memberships on our website. Our level 1 and level 2, which is getting ready to change names. A lot of people join our level 1 just to listen to the podcast. So the podcasts correlate with the live streams that we show in our memberships. That is correct, Lisa. That is correct. Um, our podcasts go in deep. They're hour-long podcasts where they correlate with our live streams and go even deeper onto how certain topics, how this relates to each specific individual. So I also wanted to show just an update of some of the work we're doing on. You will see it on our Facebook page. We are diving deep into this, like our work with the 6 Timberwolves in our level 2 membership. But this also does correlate with today's topic of when positive reinforcement training is no longer positive. How do we identify this? And we can identify that through understanding behavior. When certain behaviors happen, when certain vocalizations happen, when they don't, when you think you are delivering positive reinforcement, if you're not sure, the animal will let you know. And when I am training an animal, not only am I delivering identified positive reinforcers behaviors I want to see maintain or increase, I'm also watching, is that tail wagging? What's the placement of the ears? Is the animal licking its lips a lot? Is it giving certain vocalizations? What else is happening in the environment when that is happening? So people are asking me, is it true that alligators can't stick out their tongues? That is correct. And it correlates with this, which we were working on yesterday. We are getting ready to train the alligators something new. So, which membership are we talking about this? I do believe this is in the Parrot Project, but we're going to start showing exactly what we're doing with our alligator training in level 2. And we're getting ready to talk about in our Parrot Project, training animals to voluntarily and willingly accept restraint. That is a photo of, I'm getting ready to start applying this as soon as this live stream is over and I can get back out to the alligators today. I have several different photos that I was, excuse me, I want to show on updates on what we're doing at the center. You hear me say, keep your animals used to changing environments, and we don't just throw an animal in a new environment. We shape comfort into going in new environments. I'm not just going to pick up an animal and force them into a new environment. But when animals stay in the same environment day in and day out, that environment can become stagnant. And before I get an animal out of an enclosure, I've already trained it what I need it to do to go back into the enclosure. And that's reminding me to talk about give another example. So this enclosure, I'm so excited to say that we built last week. This is not meant for a parrot. It is meant for a different animal, but you see me taking Rico, our umbrella cockatoo, out to this environment just to see how he'd react while we continually work on the outside of this enclosure. what was really neat is I heard a lot of vocalizations from Rico that I am familiar with that he does do when he's excited. So there were a lot of people around as we were and driving by as we were building this enclosure. And Rico does enjoy attention from other people. So we heard a lot of those vocalizations happening. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and maybe come back to this because I really want to start getting into our topic. So the topic is when we are no longer using positive reinforcement. So I want to say that even though um, when we think we're using positive reinforcement, pay attention to the animal's behavior. Are we really using positive reinforcement? Because just because we're using positive reinforcement doesn't necessarily mean it's a positive or enjoyable positive experience for the animal. How do you tell these things? So and I have found myself in these situations where I'm training an animal, the animal is sitting there giving me the behavior that I want it to give me, and I'm delivering positive reinforcers. But when I start paying attention to the vocalizations from that animal, or different behaviors it's doing, I have noticed that let's stop this training session because the animal is showing me that the animal isn't necessarily enjoying this training session. So what is positive reinforcement? Positive reinforcement is an event that happens, number one, after a behavior. Number two, that causes that behavior to either maintain or increase. And I want to talk about, before we get into how do we identify when we're no longer using positive reinforcement, um, what I look for when I'm training an animal to make sure this is a positive experience for the animal. So the only reason I do what I do is because I want to empower animals and I want to see them thriving in their environment. I entered the world of animal training through the world of animal enrichment. I want to see animals thriving, not just surviving. I want to see them interacting with their environment, whether that's interacting vocally or visually with other animals. Studies also show that the most complex form of enrichment we can offer is social enrichment. I do agree with that. I see that, but it is based on the individual because not all animals are comfortable being with other animals of the same species. That's when we're working with imprints, when the animal is imprinted on us. I don't necessarily want to put that animal in with another animal of the same species because if it's imprinted on humans, that can be a dangerous situation for that animal. Um, it could be a dangerous situation for other animals in close proximity. Um, so we Social enrichment is a very complex form of enrichment. I do see that with animals that are housed with the same species. Um, Social enrichment can be in the form of training, positive reinforcement training. And you hear me say that studies show, and I'm happy to list these studies show that animals' favored form of enrichment is positive reinforcement training if we're actually using positive reinforcement. We need to make sure we're using positive reinforcement, and I see that from the animal. So let me talk about some behaviors I see when I know that I am using positive reinforcement. Some of them may be um, the animal's opportunity to engage. They're excited about the engagement. How do I know what excited looks like? In observable, measurable terms, I will identify excitement, whereas the animal initiates the training session, where the animal goes to an area that is familiar with interaction on training, um, behavior and context, which was our last podcast. Um, when do these vocalizations happen? When don't they happen? Because lemurs will make certain vocalizations. And I really don't want to make them because I'm horrible at mimicking them, and I just sound and look like an idiot on camera. But they will make certain vocalizations when they're excited. They will also make certain vocalizations when they're nervous. Those could be the same vocalization. They also make, I've heard them make that same vocalization when there's an aversive, such as a hawk or a vulture flying above. So, how do you know which one that means? That's behavior and context. What else is happening in the environment at the same time? Some other things I will look for when I'm trying to identify if I'm actually using positive reinforcement. Like I said, the animal initiates the training session, goes to the areas that have a history of where training has happened. Certain vocalizations will happen where they start initiating the training session. I see that all the time. The cue, which could be me just approaching the area, um, and them going to their stations, um, offering learned behaviors before the training session even begins. Um, we know that using positive reinforcement builds strong relationships with the trainer and other people. So now let's talk about, I mean, I only have a half an hour to talk about this, so I can't go into all the other reasons when I see that what I see from animals that lets me know that yes, I am using positive reinforcement. So I found myself in situations before, and I have a couple examples to give you where just because we're using positive reinforcement doesn't mean it's a positive experience for the animal. So the reinforcer, I need to keep in the back of my head why I am doing this. I am not just training these behaviors to say, oh, yes, I can get this behavior. Um, when I am working with an animal and when I am training an animal, we are a team. I am learning from that animal. That animal is learning from me. We have a dialogue happening. I want to see the animal actively wanting to see the training session continue. Where I have found myself in pitfalls is where I get so focused on the behavior I'm training and that I'm getting the behavior and I'm just focused on a certain part of the animal's body from the behavior that I'm wanting to get versus focusing on the sounds that they're emitting, um, the placement of the ears, the placement of the feathers, the wagging of the tail, the tuck of the tail, the vocalizations from the animal. Let me give you an example. When I train voluntary hoof trims or nail trims or anything else. This one particular example is I was training Milo the pig to accept a voluntary hoof trim, and his hooves were starting to get overgrown. And when you see a hoof get overgrown, um, it'll start to flatten out and it will start to curve up. Now, his weren't curving up, but they were starting to get longer. And I was like, I need to train him for a hoof trim. And he was standing there in front of me, and I was delivering a positive reinforcer for letting me cut off part of his hoofs. But I was so focused on getting his hoofs trimmed that I stopped paying attention to the wag of the tail, the placement of the tail. Pigs will have the where the hair stands up on the back of their neck. His hair started rising slightly. He started giving vocalizations, and not only giving vocalizations, but the certain sounds of vocalizations, the licking of the lips, and the frequency of which the vocalizations were emitted. So that's all behavior and context, because Milo's tail will wag. It will stop wagging for numerous different reasons. And it will stop wagging when he's focused and concentrated. It will also stop wagging when he's not liking a situation or getting ready to charge. And what I want to make sure that I'm not doing is reinforcing the undesired behavior. So he started licking his lips more frequently, and the vocalization that was coming out of his mouth started being a little more high pitched than when he's excited. So I was so focused on trimming his hooves that I was just like, then all of a sudden, the reinforcer for me staying focused on his hooves was the amount of clippings I was able to get from him. His hooves were looking nicer and nicer. And that was the reinforcer for why I was going on the pace that I was, and I wasn't paying attention to his behavior. When I stopped, and I think what caused me to stop and pay attention to his behavior is his behavior of him turning and looking at the hoof trimmers, and my hands on the hoof trimmers was what caught my attention. And I looked up, I looked at him, and I was like, this isn't necessarily a positive experience for this animal anymore. And I asked a few more other behaviors that I knew he already knew and would be excited about. And then I ended the training session and I stepped back and just focused on what I was thinking. Why am I doing this? I am not just here for the behavior I can get. That's the easy part. I am here because I want this animal to enjoy this experience. That is the part I need to stay focused on. What is my mission? So let me give you another example. I wish I had a photo of this, but I knew I was going to run out of time this morning. Something else I look for when that'll show me that this isn't just because I'm using positive reinforcement, this isn't necessarily a positive experience for the animal anymore. I want to give the animal the opportunity to tell me no. And let me tell you how extremely important that is. When you observe and allow the animal to tell you no, that it is not comfortable with this, you will see your relationship, your bond, whatever you want to call it, and your dialogue with that animal just skyrocket. When the animal sees that you understand that it is no longer comfortable. And a lot of times I will teach an animal, and the animal will teach me a cue to tell me that, where the animal tells me I am not comfortable with the situation. And I want that to happen. I want the animal to tell me I am not comfortable, because if I do not pay attention to those signs and those behaviors, those vocalizations, whatever it may be, I don't want to see what comes next. So if my head is down and focused on this, and I'm working off contact, protective contact, free contact, I could be putting myself in danger. Where if I'm focused on a nail trim, a hoof trim, and I am not looking up at that animal, that animal can do something else, because it's saying that I'm trying to tell this person that I am now no longer comfortable with this situation. And if this part of the communication is not clear, I need to escalate or move to another behavior that tells the person that I'm not comfortable. So I do want to pay attention to those subtle signs and behaviors that tell me the animal is no longer comfortable. And that is why I will teach, and the animal teaches me a certain vocalization or behavior is, no, I'm not comfortable. Let me give you an example on that. Probably about 15 years ago, Rocky, our Moluccan cockatoo, who is now getting ready to turn 24 or 20. I think he's getting ready to turn 25. And I adopted him when he was 8. He is the mascot of the center. And the reason the Animal Behavior Center started, because he was going to be euthanized due to his aggressive behavior. That was what was professionally advised to me. And so, not going into all the work that we did to get him to this point, but when I was finally able to touch Rocky to get Rocky to step up on my arm, and Rocky does it to this day, and I will pay attention to it every single time. I taught him, and he taught me a cue of saying no. I'm no longer enjoying this, or I don't want to do what you're asking me to do. And that is when I'm holding him like this, he will just touch his beak. And for all the volunteers watching this, if you're ever holding, and I'm sure you know this, if you're ever holding Rocky and he touches his beak to your shoulder, that means no. Stop. Do not advance. Go back to go and start over. Because what comes next is that Rocky has a long history of reinforcement of biting to say no. And if you've ever gotten bitten by a Moluccan cockatoo, I'm so sorry. It is not pleasant at all. And you'll often be bleeding before you even know it. And cockatoos can bite in a way where their mandibles make a snapping sound because of those diapsid skulls. But I do not want Rocky to have to resort to that form of communication. And there was an 8-year form of communication where biting meant no. Now this means no, and I am going to respect that. And not move any further. So when an animal gives you, when you're seeing hesitation from the animal, that can mean that this is no longer a positive experience for the animal. When the animal isn't giving you the behaviors that you're used to getting in this training session, it's hesitating, it's not coming up to you on cue. And there's numerous different ones. Um, Let me give you another example. So in our level 2, which you're going to start seeing this happening again this winter as we get ready to bring Bruce back indoors at the Animal Behavior Center for the winter. Bruce is a young American alligator who has little interaction with humans. And what interaction he has had was primarily aversive, coercive, full of negative reinforcement, mean escape avoidance behavior. He was used to being captured. So now we're teaching him, we're going to start training you a recall. So let me get into this, because this is a prime example of where training, and I found myself in this situation showing where the animal was showing me I'm not comfortable with this. So we first trained Bruce a recall, then we built him a platform. We wanted him coming out of his pond when he was in the center last year. So we cut a door in the side of his pond. But I was like, okay, we've just taught him a recall. We need to teach him to turn around and go back into the pond. So we built a platform with walls before he even came out. And this way he could come out, and we set up the environment for success to start teaching him to go back to his pond. This is one example of before we get an animal to come out of an enclosure, we already teach it to go back in. So what had happened is I started recall training Bruce because he already learned it in his pond. Now I want to start shaping the behavior of him coming through the door onto this platform. And when anything in the environment changes, or the animal has to move any one particular body part in a new way, or the trainer is moving their body part in a new way, you are training a completely new behavior. So just because he knew recall in the pond does not necessarily mean he's going to understand that calling him out of the pond. So when I would call him out of the pond onto the platform, he was eagerly moving towards me. Now he's got the reinforcer in his mouth, and I want to teach him, turn around and go back to your pond. And I know in order for alligators to swallow food, to more easily swallow food. It's easier for them to do that when they're underwater. So I knew he wanted to get back to his water, and I was trying to show that to him as quickly as possible. So what had happened, Bruce is nervous of people. Okay. So I would be extremely predictable, stand in the same position each time, use the same verbal cue each time, which I tend to always say, "Are you ready? Are you ready?" And I do that to see how the animal responds to that cue. And he would respond with starting to move towards me, to look at me, to start coming towards me. But what I didn't teach him was me walking around and behind him. When I'm working with a fearful animal, I'm always very careful not to walk behind them or not to put them in a position where they need to turn their eyes away from me. So what had happened, Bruce started coming out, and as soon as he turned, his eye would be on me from the side, but they have a blind spot. Both their eyes are right here. Their blind spot happens right in this field of vision right here. So what had happened is he turned that blind spot on me and he just bolted. So back to his pond. And I don't want that paired with my training, because I don't want fear of being involved in my training. If I can remove negative reinforcement from my training, I will, to the best of my ability. And so what I did was cue him out. What I start doing was cue him out. Sorry, I'm getting a package delivered. I would start cueing him out, and when he would take the food reinforcer, instead of staying in a position where he had to turn his eyes away from me, I would step to the right where he could continually see me as he walked away from me. I have so many different photos I wanted to show today, such as in our parrot project, we're showing baseline. The hyacinth macaws have been paired. The towel has been paired with an aversive once they see it. And I showed baseline in the parrot project yesterday. Baseline is showing a behavior before modification plan starts being put into place. So as soon as I pulled that towel out, boom, they both flew as far away from me as possible. And in the parrot project, we're going to start showing how to train voluntary restraint. We're going to start showing that in level 2 as well with the alligators. Also in level 2, we're showing our wolf training. We're getting ready to show more of our training with the lemurs. And with that being said, if you want to find out more about the work that we do here at the Animal Behavior Center, please go to our website, theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. That's where you will find the workshops, Day with the Trainer. You can contact me. We also have our webinars, our podcasts, and our memberships, which are extremely popular. In level 1, we're going to start showing nail trims and how to overcome how to work with counter conditioning. Don't forget about our upcoming parrot enrichment workshop happening this October 14th and 15th. And our level 1 and level 2, you will see a lot of our training. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And with that being said, I want to say thank you and also let you know in the middle of next month, September, I will not be having 2 episodes of Coffee with the Critters because I am going on a much needed vacation, but it does involve animals. All right. With that being said, I'll see you guys next Sunday. All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks for attending.